Hello everyone, welcome back. This is S.C. Coleman, author, and in this video we're going to be talking about specifically radio communications. It's a little bit of a technical aspect. We have covered in past videos interesting elements of the root system and how that can, essentially speaking, control the entire internet, for which most of us are obligated to use in many ways. This is a little bit of a different concept. This is the idea of a separate radio communications network operated by the occupation forces, our enemy, etc. The entities and individuals calling themselves governments, the nonprofit, non-governmental organizations, religious institutions, essentially speaking, all of the different elements which consider themselves masters or shepherds of humanity. You hear this a lot with the so-called sheepdogs being quote-unquote law enforcement, the shepherds of humanity being the quote-unquote pastoral pastors, right? Priests, all that type of stuff. So when you look at this, you have to think in their perspective. This radio communication system is intended only for them. They're using systems already in place and attempting to acquire intellectual property ownership over those systems for their own personal use. Down here at the bottom, we have all the general functionality. Then among that general functionality, say, maintenance, traffic, so-called police, fire, all that stuff, right? All the mundane, mixed in with the mundane, are their communications. That's how they do it. They try to hide among the mass and pretend like they're like everyone else. And that's what we're reading here. Also, their communication system is designed to be partially parasitic. They're hoping that mass catastrophe will happen if someone tries to just shut the whole thing down. But at the same time, that if everything gets shut down, they will continue to be able to operate. They will continue the so-called continuity of governance that they talk about. Now, another way we can look at this is based off the board game Monopoly. They have monopolized the land. In essence, the way that you win at Monopoly, and I believe that that game in itself is what some might call a PSYOP, psychological operation, is you either acquire all the spaces so that nobody can pass through the area without paying, and thus you have monopolized all the spaces. Other players can't move around without having to pay the one who, quote, owns everything. So the objective of Monopoly is to own everything so that everyone has to pay you. That's essentially speaking what the world we live in is. It's you can't go anywhere without having to pay the piper, the house always wins, those types of things, right? You can't go anywhere without having to pay the same entity, which in turn forces you to pay them wherever you go. This idea is applicable here where they're attempting to monopolize radio communications as well. The first one we have is the Memorandum of Understanding between the U.S. Department of the Interior and the State of Ohio regarding the use of federally interoperable channels by non-federal entities. Now, to start with, even though all of these, quote, agreements make it look like it's being done separately between separate institutions, they all use the same words, they all have the same structure, relatively speaking, they all have the same purpose. They are, most of them, worded the same way as well, meaning it's indicative that it's coming from a singular entity, a singular source. The centralized component, if you will. acting by and through the Statewide Interoperability Executive Committee, SIEC, its successors and assigns, each sometimes hereinafter individually called party, and both sometimes hereinafter collectively called the parties. Obviously written by an attorney, right? The points of contact information listed in Appendix B shall be reviewed and updated as appropriate at a minimum of every 2 years. NTIA manual designates specific discrete frequencies in the 162-174 MHz and 406.1-420 MHz bands for use as, quote, federal interoperability channels. So that's their cover story, the cover identity. Non-federal use must be coordinated through the FCC through the Statewide Interoperability Coordinator, SWIC, for a state-appointed official. And there you go. That's just like the pastor or priest is the middleman between you and God, quote-unquote God, even though that's an old use of the word good. God is good is literally, the word God means good. And that's what they're doing here. They have a go-between, a middleman, who is representing the federal. Their word is law, essentially. If they say this is what the Fed says, you're not supposed to go around them to the Fed, quote unquote, the Fed. You're supposed to just simply accept that they are the conduit and that they are carrying out what the, quote, Fed wishes. Or state-appointed official. So the Statewide Interoperability Coordinator is independent or a state-appointed official. I think that's really obvious what they're doing there. And this also lists a government master file assignment. I always love their little lofty words, don't they? Nice little titles and declarations and statements and what was that one that they had in 2020? The mandates, right? The U.S. Department of the Interior shall appoint a point of contact who will coordinate and maintain the spectrum use agreements through the IRAC or IRAC process. That's India, Romeo, Alpha, Charlie. I wonder what a spectrum use agreement is. Generally speaking, the word spectrum pertains to the entire range of frequencies in existence, which is, but you could have a spectrum that is a particular spectrum that is between specific frequency ranges. That's usually called a range, though. The frequency spectrum, the radio frequency spectrum, usually pertains to everything that pertains to radio frequencies, and you can say the same thing about the internet. The internet spectrum is all the stuff that pertains to the internet. So I don't know how you could have an agreement about the use of a spectrum. Sounds weird. The federal interoperability channels identified in Appendix A of this document may be used within the state of Ohio by, quote, public safety agencies at all levels of government. And they put that in quotation marks because that, of course, is their cover story. Or a state-appointed official shall serve as the primary coordination point within the state of Ohio for coordination between the qualified non-federal agencies and the federal government, providing non-federal agencies with information regarding channel programming and usage as required, and promoting and monitoring non-federal agency compliance with conditions listed in Section C below. Federal licenses may be acquired without cost by cooperators in submitting Form FCC-601 Main, FCC 601-601D, station location and antenna structure information, and FCC 601H, private land mobile and land mobile auxiliary radio service information. That sounds like a instruction for similar to how you would input a coded phrase in order to gain and response, but also to confirm that you are the authenticate yourself. The use of these forms probably has a particular order that you put them in, and just simply using these forms as listed here authenticates the request. It could be any computer program could be running this stuff. Could be completely automated. The rights, duties, and obligations contained in this MOU shall operate only between the parties to this MOU and shall inure solely to the benefit of the parties to this MOU. Now, if that doesn't sound like treason, then we need to get, then obviously there's a different definition of treason at work, but that is essentially speaking the idea that it's for their use, them alone, and they are in opposition, or they are separate from the population or the regular people. They consider themselves to be separate in all respects, meaning not constitutional by their own volition. They are fully aware, willfully and knowledgeably engaged in treason. The parties intend and expressly agree that only parties signatory to this MOU shall have any legal or equitable right to seek to enforce this MOU. Isn't that nice? Oh, and then we got this stupid section. Sovereign immunity. The U.S. Department of the Interior and the state of Ohio and its agencies do not waive sovereign immunity, like they ever had any, by entering into this MOU and specifically retain immunity and all defenses available to them as sovereigns. Like I said, they love their lofty titles. They love to declare themselves to be this and that, vice chancellor, principal, etc., executive director, southern nonsense, pursuant to all applicable state statutes and all other applicable law. Of course, if you come along and say, the U.S. Constitution says that you are engaged in warfare and treason, meaning, of course, the constitutional definition of treason, including warfare, or providing aid and comfort and all that nonsense, then they will say it's not applicable law. Yeah, well, you'll see just how applicable reality can be, especially when that reality is behind the barrel of a gun. Because they always love to leverage that little nasty, insinuated threat. But you know that they don't have anything to back it up with. They have no teeth. So they whine and complain and sit around and pretend like they have all of these lofty powers. But in reality, they're extremely weak. And their entire control structure basis is designed off of fraud and threats. But in reality, if they actually want to start a fight, they'll run away. They'll always run away. And they'll leave whoever unfortunate soul believed them holding the bag, hanging in the wind, blowing in the wind, etc. You know, there's all those different sayings about leaving somebody to take the fallout for what you started. U.S. Department of the Interior, Christopher Lewis, digitally signed. Here's a bunch of stupid nonsense. U.S. Government, Department of the Interior, Office of Secretary of the Interior, Christopher Lewis. There's a string of numbers, signed 2018, May 24th. Says he's the Office of the Chief Information Officer, National Radio and Spectrum Program Office, 12201 Sunrise Valley Drive, mail stop 241-//2P101, Reston, Virginia 20192, and this is not filled in the date section, as you can see here. And the next one for Rick Schmall, Statewide Interoperability Coordinator, Ohio Statewide Interoperability Executive Committee, State of Ohio Marks Program Office, 4200 Surface Road, Columbus, Ohio 43228, 614-995-0060, is dated May 24th, 2018. And then the last signature is Stu Davis. Yeah, like that's a real name. S-T-U Davis, Chief Information Officer / Assistant Director. Yeah, most of the people who are who you find with their names plastered all over this crap usually have some like acting deputy assistant title or some other nonsense like that. Ohio Department of Administrative Services. The federal interoperability channels identified in the following table may be used within the state of Ohio by public agencies. Well, public safety agencies. at all levels of government subject to the conditions listed in Section 6 of this MOU and Section blah blah blah. LE channels will be identified with continuous tone controlled squelch systems, CTCSS, frequency 167.9 Hertz and or network access code NAC. Here's an interesting one. It has the $sign, the number 68, and the letter F, or Foxtrot. So $68 Foxtrot. I don't know what that means. Anyway, IR calling channels will not use CTCSS, but CTCSS 167.9 may be used on other IR channels as needed. Federal Representative for Incident Response Spectrum. That's stupid. Christopher Lewis, Interoperability Program Manager, use of Department of Interior, same address as listed before. Federal Representative for Law Enforcement Spectrum. So I guess here we're understanding their use of the word spectrum. They don't mean spectrum to mean what I said, which is that the radio frequency spectrum is everything that has to do with radio frequency. So they're in fact, in their usage, redefining the word spectrum to fit some other concocted moronic purpose. Quan Vu for Federal Representative for Law Enforcement Spectrum. What kind of name is that? Quan Vu. That's Queen, Uniform, Alpha, November, Victor, Uniform. U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ/OCIO/SES/RFOT, 13990 Park East Circle, Chantilly, Virginia 20151. Office number 571-468-9858. quanvu@usdoj.gov. Statewide Interoperability Coordinator for Designated State Representative, Rick Schmall. Same address as I read before. So-called office address, right? The Statewide Interoperability Executive Committee shall consist of a representative from each of the entities listed in Appendix A attached hereto. Be the single point of the S, that's the Statewide Interoperability Executive Committee, shall regularly report to the directors of the Department of Public Safety and the Department of Administrative Services and is authorized to be the single point of contact with federal communications entities for the state of Ohio. So like I said, it's the same little game that they play in churches, right? They're the go-between. Their word represents everything and you can't circumnavigate them because there is in fact nothing actually above them. They're just pretending. They're saying, oh, this is coming from on high. There is no on high, they're just making it up. All state departments, agencies, boards, commissions, and officers shall cooperate and provide any necessary assistance requested by the SIEC or any duly authorized member or representative thereof in the performance of its duties. So yeah, this is basically like we're doing this, and they're pretending like they're getting orders to do it, but really it's just them doing it. They're just making it up. But they are the supposed head honcho kind of deal. April 18th, 2012, signed John Kasich, Governor. Yeah, that means absolutely nothing. Appendix A, Ohio Statewide Interoperability Executive Committee, the Ohio Department of Public Safety, the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association, the Ohio Office of Information Technology, the Ohio Emergency Management Agency, the Ohio Emergency Medical Services Board, Ohio Office of Homeland Security, Ohio State Highway Patrol, Ohio Association of Chiefs of Police, Ohio State Fire Marshals, Ohio Association of Fire Chiefs, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, Ohio Department of Health, Ohio County Commissioners Association, Ohio Township Trustees Association, Emergency Management Association of Ohio, Ohio National Guard, Ohio Chapter of the Association of Public Safety Communication Officials, Ohio Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation, Chairman of the FCC Region 33 Planning Committee, Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services, Ohio Department of Youth Services, Ohio Board of Regents, Ohio Hospital Association, representative from Ohio's electrical service providers, Ohio Municipal League, representative from each UASI area, Franklin County, Columbus, Wood County, Toledo, Cuyahoga County, Cleveland, Hamilton County, Cincinnati, Southeast Indiana, and Northern Kentucky. representative from a mid-sized city radio system, representative from a mid-sized county radio system, representative from each of the 8 Homeland Security Interoperability Communications Committees. So as usual, they have all their little groups out there to try to make it look like they are inevitable, they're enormous, they're huge, they're everywhere. But often you'll find the same names pop up, relatively speaking. But they're all essentially still minions. They're taking orders from the idiots that wrote this garbage, who are mostly living, in most cases, they're living or operating out of some position overseas, which usually is Switzerland. Our next document, Sacramento Regional Radio Communication Systems SCRRCS application for access to the SRCS as a secondary participant, October 4th, 2019. Now, of course, it's not really important what they call this thing. You've got marks, bricks, circs, however they probably say that circs. That's Sierra Romeo, Romeo, Charlie, Sierra. It doesn't matter what they call it, because it's essentially speaking all the same crap. No matter which state you go into, county, municipality, whatever, it's all the same stuff, which, like I said before, is indicative of a centralized controlling hand, a centralized ordering structure, probably Switzerland, perhaps, but obviously written by attorneys. And either way, they put the appearance of separate and different, but in fact they're all the same, and you could just exchange any of these names with whatever and it would still be the same thing. So the requesting agency is Winters Police Department, 702 Main Street, Winters, California. Sponsoring agency is West Sacramento Police Department, 550 Jefferson Boulevard, West Sacramento, California. Please answer these questions and submit this request to your intended sponsor. The sponsor will then represent it to the Technical Advisory Committee, always some type of stupid committee, right, for their review and approval. After TAC approval, this agreement will be submitted to the System Management Group of the SRRCS for final approval. This is the Criteria Systems Management Group. Yeah, right, they're probably not that big. Of the Sacramento Regional Radio Communication System, CERT, will use in considering your request to become a secondary user. The requesting agency shall share the same overall goals and objectives of the Systems Management Group as stated in the CERT's licensing agreement. The requesting agency shall work in concert with, not in opposition to, the primary members of the Systems Management Group. What a weird thing to say, right? The requesting agency shall work in concert with, not in opposition to, the primary members of the Systems Management Group. Public safety and public service shall be their prime reason, as I said, it's cover story, for requesting access to the system. That's not their actual reason, that's just their stated reason. Well, even if it was their actual reason, they'll redefine the terms to mean something else anyway. So, to maintain a modern, professional law enforcement agency capable of interacting with allied public safety agencies for the public good. Yeah, I think we all know what that means. To improve communications interoperability by adding CERC's talk groups to our radios. So basically, they just said what they want to do, and this lists 35 radios for the Winters Police Department. So the obvious thing that they just stated there is that, what I said before, is that they want to be able to leverage this communication system as monopolized intellectual property, which they own it. And then they can use that and leverage it to harness the effective force mechanism, because that's what they care about. They don't care about fire or EMS or any of this other stuff. They care about the effective force mechanism. They want to be able to use fire as a force mechanism. They want to be able to use EMS as a force mechanism. And of course, they most importantly want to use the quote law enforcement, it's in the name, enforce, as a force mechanism at their beckoning. They can summon it whenever they want it and use it for whatever they want. That's what they want to be able to do. And that's what they talk about when they say allied public safety agencies for the public good. They will simply list it as public good. They'll say, I'm an allied public safety agency, and therefore you have to do what I say. That's how it works. But there's no argument. There's no room for argument. It's simply the objective, the order, whatever it is, gets pushed out over this radio system, which they're only the ones that are supposed to control it. And then that gets essentially sent out as directives or mandates. No questioning it, it's inevitable. Of course, it's not going to work if there are no quote-unquote law enforcement people. And that's what's going on today. You have very few of them. Very few. And they're pretending like they have this giant, robust, heavy occupation force that can overwhelm you at any time. That's mostly crap you only ever see on movies and TV shows, where you can take 4 people and copy them a bunch of times and make a whole crowd. Does the requesting agency have its own radio system and the ability to share the use/coverage provided by their existing system? If it is a 700/800 megahertz system, the Winters Police Department does not have an 800 megahertz system. What is the operating structure of the requesting agency? Are they structured as a for-profit or non-profit? Are they staffed by volunteers or paid staff? What is their source of funding and their ability to pay? Well, this is awesome. Listen to this crap. The Winters Police Department is staffed by paid law enforcement professionals. Yeah, right. More like 2-bit thugs that are relatively organized by some distant foreign hand. The department is fully funded. Oh, actually, hold on. The department is fully funded. They can't even write properly. Fully funded by federal, state, and local tax revenues. Fully funded by federal, state, and local tax revenues. So local comes after federal and state. That's nice. We all knew that, to be honest. And here we've got a purpose is mutual aid. You have listed here, interestingly, UC Davis PD, the Sacramento Sheriff's Department. So obviously this is for a lot more than just the quote Winters Police Department, right? You have patrol, TAC, SD, Zone SSDA, shall not, the Winters Police Department shall not, that's bold and in all caps, shall not. You love that? Shall not connect the above listed radio equipment through any gateway device. Raytheon ACU-1000, Cytec, Rios, etc. without a separate written agreement with the CERTs. Without the written agreement and during a major emergency, agencies may connect through a gateway only when CERT's technical representatives are monitoring, overseeing, and directly assisting the process. Boy, that sounds like they're really worried about that. For obvious reasons. The County of Sacramento Department of Technology, or designated representative/contract, is the only agency authorized to program the specified radio equipment on the CERT's talk groups. I mean, these people, this is military stuff. These people are exceptionally afraid of these things being compromised because it can lead back to them. They are trying to hide. And as their saying goes, that they love to say all the time, is that if you're not up to no good, then you have no reason to hide. They love to say that all the time because they're up to no good and they have a reason to hide. This agreement may be revoked at any time by the Sacramento Regional Radio Communication System Governing Board, the System Management Group, or the sponsoring agency. Upon 30-day notice, notification regarding any revocation will be made in writing. The Winters Police Department agrees to disable the emergency buttons on the radios operate on the CERT system. Now for the Chief of Police, we have John P. Miller, signed 10/4/2019, DocuSign, of course, and Robert Strange, DocuSign, Deputy Chief of Police for the West Sacramento Police Department, 10/10/2019, and the Sacramento Regional Radio Communication Systems Management Group is a Rami Zakaria. DocuSigned 10/21/2019. Jeez. Primary point of contact is that John P. Miller, 702 Main Street, Winters, California, 95694. Secondary point of contact is Dina Humphrey, YECA, that's Yankee Echo Charlie Alpha, 35 North Cottonwood Street, Woodland, California. And the address for this person is D. Humphrey at YOLO911.org. Wonder if that's an attorney. The red emergency button on our radios will be disabled in the future. If our agency needs change regarding the emergency button, we will bring the matter to TAC for discussion and coordination. All secondary users request to activate the emergency buttons on their radios must be approved by the SMG. The non-emergency use of another agency's talk group requires a pre-arranged operational plan with the talk group's owner. Our agency understands and agrees to notify when possible the appropriate search dispatch center prior to conducting operations in their area and that may have a potential for requiring emergency support. We understand and agree to use mutually agreed upon radio alias. This alias will be determined at the time our radio IDs are issued. Further, once identified, all search dispatch centers will be notified which agencies own a particular alias and the appropriate points of emergency contact. Our agency understands and agrees to respond to dispatch inquiries regarding accidental key-ups. The appropriate response to these inquiries will be similar to our agency's name, XXX accidental. In the case of life-threatening events, i.e. shots fired, i.e. shots fired, one at gunpoint, physical, etc. It's just stuff stupid. We understand and agree that search dispatchers may not be aware of our location and they will require our staff to include any additional information needed to provide them with assistance. So, on to the next piece of garbage. Here we have the Commonwealth of Kentucky Mutual Aid and Interoperability Memorandum of Understanding. By the way, all of this stuff is starkly, heavily, and blatantly contradictory and knowledgeably and willfully contrary to the U.S. Constitution. It is black and white. It cannot be more unconstitutional. If every section of the Constitution says, you shall not do this, as they like to say, you shall not, right? And they are doing it, that's black and white. That's it, period, black and white. It states law enforcement is the militia. The militia in the Second Amendment is those who can keep and bear arms, but more importantly, it states no state shall keep standing armies. What do? They keep standing armies. They also shall not coordinate into compacts or form together into special unions, which is exactly the crap they're doing. It's amazing. And of course they try to say, oh, well, we've got the directive of Congress. There is no Congress. But there's so many things in the Constitution where it stipulates Congress can only do this and is responsible to do this. They can't like delegate it or send it to someone else, right? They always have these stupid arguments. But really they're not arguments, they're just justifications. They just say it and therefore it's so, and they just do whatever hell they want anyway. You can't really argue with them. It's sort of a waste of time anyway. You have to argue to areas that they don't manipulate or control, which are very few today. But the fact of the matter is they are blatantly, willfully, and knowledgeably engaged in constitutional treason, meaning leveraging war against the people in the several states and adhering to our enemies, providing them aid and comfort. They are doing that, and they know they're doing that. They're not ignorant, it's not accidental, right? It's all planned. And the main thing behind it is that if you're not up to if you're up to no good, or if you're not up to no good, so whatever they say all the time is if you're not up to no good, then you should have nothing to hide. So we can go in and search and pick through everything about you just simply off the fact that that you should accept you're not up to no, that you should just let us do that to prove and show that you're all above board, right? Well, they're not going to do that. In fact, they have written all this crap, ways for them to hide and keep everything confidential, and excuses for it, of course. But the real purpose is, of course, they don't want themselves, their operational components, to be found who are trying to hide behind the scenes and let everybody else take the consequences and the fall for their nasty intentions. So this is a blanket template, memorandum of understanding for immediate mutual aid and interoperability between the local public safety agency, that's in brackets, and the Kentucky State Police. The Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, is intended to document the intention of the applicant agency's request for permission to operate on radio frequencies granted and assigned to the Kentucky State Police, KSP, by the Federal Communications Commission, or rather under the guise of the Federal Communications Commission. These channels will be collectively referred to as the mutual aid frequencies and will be offered to applicant agencies who agree to abide by the rules of use. The mutual aid program will be provided to applicant agencies at no cost and may be used with existing radios currently in use in the Commonwealth. Furthermore, KSP has agreed to staff the program so no additional personnel resources will be required by participating agencies. By virtue of signing and submitting this MOU, the applicant affirms it will comply with the operational and technical guidelines and terms prescribed herein. Okay, so they're not providing anything at all. They're just writing up a piece of garbage that some little shill idiot is going to sign, and they're essentially speaking signing over all this stuff that wasn't theirs to begin with. It was stolen, whatnot, used under false pretense, etc. And basically giving it over as, quote, property to whoever the administering entity writing this stuff is. Responsibilities of the parties. The Public Safety Agency agrees to, number 4, submit a list indicating the number, make, and model of each type of radio communication equipment that will be programmed with the mutual aid frequency. Example, 20 Motorola ABC handheld, 15 Kenwood CDE vehicle mounted 2GE and XYZ base stations. Kentucky State Police agrees to, number 5, monitor the mutual aid calling channels and provide assistance and BIM cross connects as required by incident commanders. So, as I said before, military occupation. They are not for us, they are against us. And they know they are too. And they always try to pretend the little victim game. Oh no, we're just trying to help. Why are you so mean to us? We're just here to help. Right? They always act like that. Just sad. Kentucky State Police Commander / Communications Branch, 94 Airport Road, Frankfort, Kentucky. The applicant agency must visit the mutual aid website annually to update their information, download updates, make recommendations and comments, and keep the agreement current. The website will be reviewed periodically to ensure compliance and to consider recommendations to determine whether the MOU should be revised. Agencies failing to keep their agreement current may not be allowed to renew their agreement or may be canceled if blatant misuse is determined. Any terms of this MOU found to be inconsistent or in conflict with any current KSP directives or policies may be deemed invalid by the commander of the KSP, but the remaining terms will remain in effect. Applicant agency. Is the applicant a state agency? What type of agency are you? And here it lists emergency management, disaster response, military, other governmental, provide type. Oh, jeez. What a bunch of garbage. Which mutual aid frequency are you applying to operate within? The 150 MHz VHF channels are simplex only, while the 450 MHz and 800 MHz channels are repeated. To use the 450 MHz or 800 MHz channels in simplex, also known as direct talk round or non-repeated mode, program both transmit and receive frequencies with the same frequency listed under the receive /direct frequencies. 150 MHz frequency band, and here it's got a bunch of stuff. You got direct is 155.47, 155.7525, 155, etc. Right? You got VMA, VCall 10, VTAC 11, VTAC 12. Here down you have the 450 megahertz frequency band, and you've got UMA, UCall, UTAC, 458, 300, 458-2125, 458-4625, PL 16.2. I don't know what that actually means. They have here PL equals 162.2, and above that is PL equals 156.7. So that's obviously not the frequency. 800 megahertz frequency band, ID, 8 call, 8 TAC. That's 8, the number 8, not the letter A, but the number 8. Primary call channel, police, fire, EMS, command and control. So that's interesting that you have the 150 megahertz and 450 megahertz frequency bands listed for use as primary call channel, and only the 800 megahertz frequency band is listed for primary call channel, police, fire, EMS, command and control. So what's up with these first two, right? What radio systems will be mutual aid frequencies to be programmed into? Handheld, vehicle mounted, mobile, and base stations. Applicant agency. Type accepted in the Commercial Land Radio Service, whatever the hell that is. All subordinate employees will receive National Incident Management System Training, or NIMS. So there's your brainwashing nonsense. Once submitted, the agency's name should appear on the authorized user document and the URL listed below within 10 working days. Mutual aid program manager is listed as a Derek Nessel Road. That's November Echo Sierra Sierra Echo Lima Romeo Oscar Delta Echo at ky.gov. That's not the adult jelly brand. And this last document we're going to look at is the Memorandum of Understanding Mississippi Interoperability Channel Plan, MICP. Memorandum of Understanding MOU establishes permissions guidelines for use of the interoperability P25 700 MHz or mutual aid radio channels by private sector emergency response organizations licensed or otherwise entitled, right, there's that word, entitled, to operate in the public safety pool. It imposes certain protocols, procedures, and obligations upon jurisdictions hereby authorized to use state licensed radio channels held by the Mississippi Department of Public Safety and the Wireless Communications Commission. Like I said, they just changed the names, but it's really all the same crap. This MOU authorizes the use of certain radio frequencies and trunking talk groups by emergency response organizations as defined by Department of Homeland Security, Office of Domestic Preparedness, and the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency. Generally, this includes organizations in the following governmental disciplines. Here you've got public safety communications, that's vague, healthcare, also vague, hazardous materials, public health, equally vague, governmental administration, extremely vague, public works forge/transportation. And of course, it lists all the usual stuff, so-called law enforcement, emergency management, fire departments. In consultation with the Department of Information Technology Services having the authority to permit state and local agencies use of the communication system under the terms and conditions established by the Commission, to establish in conjunction with the Department of Information Technology Services policies, procedures, and standards which shall be incorporated into a comprehensive management plan for the operation of the statewide communication system. The Commission is further tasked with the responsibility of approving all wireless communication purchases within the state and for setting forth rules and regulations governing purchases. So that line should be read again. The Commission is further tasked with the responsibility for approving all wireless communication purchases, including cell phones, within the state and for setting forth rules and regulations governing these purchases. That is ridiculous. Mississippi Wireless Communication Commission will manage and maintain an accurate database of federal and state agencies and local government jurisdictions that have accepted and signed this MOU. And the fact they can get away with this crap is mind-blowing. Issue the talk group for the region the jurisdiction is located and user IDs that will be used in the state's licensed 700 MHz trunking system. Monitor usage of the interoperability talk groups as defined in the MICP. Jurisdiction will manage use of the interoperability frequencies and talk groups by its employees, ensuring compliance with the Mississippi Interoperability Channel Plan, MICP, and federal, state, local laws, ordinances, and rules. Prioritize the use of the interoperability frequencies and talk groups. Emergency or urgent operation involving imminent danger to life or property, property of course being their most important. Special event generally or pre-planned nature, joint training exercises, and interagency en route communications. Implement radio communications procedures consistent with the National Incident Management System, NIMS, and Incident Command System, ICS, including, that's the same thing crap that we read on the last one. Use plain language without 10 codes or agency-specific codes / jargon, and I know in actuality they don't do that. Use the calling protocol agency unit number, this agency unit number rather than unit number to unit number. Examples, Brandon EMS 41, this is Heinz Fire 20, or Incident Command, this is MHPCI. Then just a bunch of tables and figures and whatnot. Parties mutually agree. Jurisdiction and the Mississippi Wireless Communication Commission agree that this memorandum of understanding may be canceled at any time by written notice to the other party or by subsequent agreements. And it's unsigned, but under Mississippi Wireless Communication Commission, it has filled in for printed name Corona Carroll and title Executive Director. So that's obviously not a real person, because that means that upon the signing by any agency, that's just going to be signed by AutoPen, essentially. That's not a real person. And that's how you find these people who exist in the same positions for decades. No change, no promotion, no demotion, no nothing. That doesn't happen. That only happens when the person isn't real and the signature is just a formality done from behind the scenes somewhere. It's the auto pen.